Well, here we go. The Cyberpunk 2077 Backlash seems to be beginning. And with this being a game that is so hotly anticipated based off the back of the excellent work done with The Witcher 3, it does seem like this is a time where gamers could be more pitted against those who create coverage of games, and that could lead to quite a bit of spicy fallout. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another industry report. Today a slightly more opinion-focused one, because we are talking about Cyberpunk 2077 and essentially two of the dramas that have happened with this game. And I do think they're actually fairly interesting. And importantly, I think they're interesting for an ideas-based reason, not just a people and events one. So I think there is actual proper interesting stuff that we can talk about. So the first topic is the behind closed doors demo. There seem to be wildly different reports, and a lot of what kicked this off was a rock, paper, shotgun article that was quite critical of some of its mechanics, while really having a larger focus on more social issues in the game, and how that's actually quite different to, say, Greg Miller's opinions in Twitter and PC Gamer and a lot of what I've heard from other people, and that's kind of kicked off one thing. And then the second thing is an in-game advertisement where there has been a little bit of controversy over the model, and a lot of, well, some people anyway, thinking that it is exploitative in nature. And I think that one particularly sparks off just a pretty interesting topic about, you know, a game that is providing social commentary, because make no mistake, Cyberpunk 2077 is a game that's making social commentary. That is the core of the cyberpunk genre, of anything that is showing a dystopian future. It is in a way being inherently critical of a lot of what it is showing. So it's all fairly interesting topics. So first we're going to tackle the diverging opinions on the actual quality of the game. And I think what really sparked off this discussion was the rock, paper, shotgun article. Now, what's interesting about that article is, there's a lot of talk about the game mechanics and the author not really liking them and thinking that the game does look pretty boring and weightless, essentially, just with the gunplay and that sort of thing, but that he also spent quite a lot of time talking about the immutable characteristics of the opponents shown in that gameplay section, and some of the language, basically some of the language being used in the game. And what's quite interesting about that is how different of a take it is to a lot of other basically takes that we've seen from people who have seen that demo. So over on PC Gamer, we have an article saying that basically what the demo is teasing is something that is remarkably ambitious and full of depth, and we're seeing similar takes all around the place. Greg Miller, of course, on Twitter had very, very positive takes on the game. So there's been a lot of interest in why this rock, paper, shotgun article was really so particularly negative. And really, there's a lot that could be said, but I think what matters is what it boils down to. And what it essentially boils down to is the author operating in good faith? So are they, for an example, like you're in an area of the city and you're fighting a certain gang, and the immutable characteristics of that gang are, of course, pretty much all rather similar, and they sort of took issue with that, saying that was rather problematic, and a lot of people have sort of thought that that is coloring the rest of that particular journalist's coverage of the game, that essentially, because they've been ticked off by this one thing, they're taking a pretty surface level look at the game, and they're not really treating it as a game with the depth that it probably will have, and essentially just doing a lot of extrapolation based off a very surface level visual appraisal of the game. And to be honest, after reading the article and reading all the other stuff that I've seen about this game, and again actually rewatching the full gameplay demo that they released just under a year ago, I've got to say that while I don't know if that author is operating in good faith or bad faith, I do think they're taking a rather surface level appraisal of things. So when they were talking about the immutable characteristics of essentially the gang members that the player was fighting through that section of the game, I think that really one thing that was being sort of lost by the author perhaps is actually inherent to the genre. So this is a cyberpunk game. It's a dystopian future. It's a bad future, not one that anyone wants, certainly not one that the creators of the game would support and want. And one thing that happens in a lot of games like that is you do have ghettoized areas where, people who look similar are treated very badly. And that is something that the game's, we assume, not going to be supportive of, right? Or, it's going to show that as a potential dark future and have the player draw their own commentary on it, because, it's cyberpunk, it's the world of cyberpunk. What's the game trying to do? It's trying to create the world of cyberpunk. And I think that that's essentially a lot of what's going on here. I think that whenever the audience who are watching a Cyberpunk trailer and getting excited about the game, whenever they see something like that, they see, oh wow, this is a part of a really dark future, right? This is a totally crazy world that you're inhabiting in this game, and through that world you're going to learn a lot of depth and a lot of nuance. And essentially that means that I think those people have enough goodwill, right, with CD Projekt Red that they think, right, if this particular situation was done by a developer badly, it actually could be a problem. And I'm not going to, fair enough to the rock, paper, shotgun guy if he does think that they're going to end up doing it like that. But given that it is CD Projekt Red and a lot of their writing in the past, yeah, one would think, give them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, they've probably included these elements, for a reasonable enough reason, because they want to explore that and how that is in a dark dystopian future that, again, nobody actually wants to have happen. And I suppose that's what's interesting. The real fans of that game, they're going to be looking at it and extrapolating all of the depth. But if there's somebody who doesn't really care about the game that much, and they're just sitting through an E3 demo that they don't really care about, and they're taking a pretty surface level appraisal of the game, then, yeah, you can see how totally divergent takes and opinions would actually come out from that. And I think you can see how really the one of the audience who actually cares about that game, cares about that setting, and importantly, understands Cyberpunk, understands a dystopia, what they see from that, right? They're going to be more willing to be on board with the creative vision of CD Projekt Red and assume that that is what they're going for. And I think this is something that leads me on to the next topic very well. I do want to talk about the gameplay issues that were brought up in the Rock, Paper, Shotgun article, as well as the other things, but I think it's just such a natural bridging off point to the in-game advertisement. So this in-game advertisement was criticized as being exploitative, again, because of the characteristics of the model being displayed in the advertisement. And if you're wondering why in this video I'm jumping around using words, it's because there's actually a lot of text analysis that's done on this platform, and basically if you have a certain density of words that could be seen to be an issue, your video will get suppressed. So that's why I kind of dance around words, but I know that because the images that are on the screen are all I know you actually understand what I'm talking about. So this was seen as being exploitative and somewhat being a problem. And this kind of kicked off this whole big drama. A few authors went against the game because of that, and I think it really just showed me a lack of good faith and a willingness to understand, and I suppose almost an unwillingness to understand the entire point of the genre. So let's break this one down. If you look at the art, it's pretty obvious what it is. It's a big, sort of sexed up marketing poster. And a lot of people were talking about the characteristics of the model in the poster, that it was particularly exploiting that. And I think that's a remarkably odd view to take. And it's actually something that is very, very easily refuted when you actually ask the artist who made it. So, I believe it was Kotaku actually spoke to the artist who made it through CD Projekt Red, and they talked about what the point of that art was. And of course, if you are somebody who knows the genre, you're going to understand, it's going to be the first thing that you read. But if you're looking at this, perhaps not with good faith, and you're trying to sort of extract something that you can sort of use to, as ammunition against the game, then you're maybe not going to see it that way. So from the perspective of the artist who made this piece of art, essentially it was like the exploitation of beauty by corporations. And that's a pretty core thing in anything that's dystopian or, cyberpunk or all that. Now, okay, cyberpunk, I doubt the transhumanism stuff is going to be dealt with too much, in the same way that you maybe would see that dealt with in the Deus Ex series. But anyway, right? It's about the corporate exploitation of beauty. Now, in this world of Cyberpunk 2077, the reason why that particular model is there on that advertisement is because it is seen within that world as being a beautiful thing, and that is why it is being exploited. So them using that particular model for that advertisement is not really being it's not really being anti that, right? It's saying that this is beautiful and that in this universe it is being exploited. And that really does render a lot of those criticisms pretty darn hollow, because again, you look at this genre, what is it about? It's pretty much about corporate exploitation of stuff. That's a lot of what a dystopia is. It's a lot of what, I'm talking sort of loose terms here, but basically to the sort of cyberpunk dystopian sort of genres and all of those things, that's what's going on. So I think that was another sort of fairly trumped up out of nowhere story that really is not much of a story, because if you are somebody who knows what this game is about, and I'm not saying anyone really knows what the plot is, but you know what cyberpunk is, right? So if you know what that is, you see this, you're like, oh yeah, this is just completely corporatized exploitative marketing. Like, that's what it is within the context of the game world. So the reason they are showing it to you like that is not because they agree with it, it's because it's a part of their world, and they know that is a world that is not a good future for humans to end up with. And we can all agree, we don't end up in a sort of cyberpunk dystopia. Probably not. At least most of us don't want that. And really much of this just comes down to, does somebody who is making a game have to agree with all the content that they put in their game? Quite obviously no, because like, there's a few different ways you can go about things. So if you want to have your game, if you want your game to include a message that is against sort of the corporate exploitation of beauty, well, you could just outright say that, or you could just integrate it into a part of your world, a part of what the player seeps up through the experience of living in that world, you know, in the hopes of actually giving that player a more deep appreciation of things. Because yes, the player will go in, they'll see that advertisement, and, you know, there probably won't be an NPC standing beside the advertisement saying how it's bad and wrong, but that will be just the context of the game. A game that in its general storytelling will be quite critical of a lot of the root issues that led to that advertisement appearing in the game lore. And that's what begins to create a layered, deep story, a rich world, like an immersive sim essentially, that people can really just feel like they're living there. And if you can successfully, as a creator, make your player that immersed, then all of the sort of little inbuilt, you know, sort of subtextual criticism that you have, that's going to land so much better with your player if it's done like that, instead of just being straight up. I forget what it's from, but there's something where it's some like writer guy is angry that you can't just have your character stand on the stage and scream their feelings to the audience, and I think it's kind of like that. Subtlety in subtext is really important, and a lot of these things, they have to operate in subtext, and that means that you can probably take them out of context quite easily because they're designed to be subtext. So that's essentially my take on that. Now, as for Cyberpunk 2077, as an overall project, what do I think about that? Well, I can say with the rock, paper, shotgun guy, yeah, the gunplay doesn't look amazing. Fair enough. Now, a lot of that's because it's an RPG, and I'm not saying that as an inherent diss against RPGs, but, you know, when you're using your pistol and numbers are flying out of the enemy, some games will do that well, some won't do it that well. I'd say for this game, you know, if you bonk an enemy in the head with a pistol and a low number comes out of their head and they're still just standing there and, you know, they don't really have a proper hit reaction, that's not going to feel that great. And when I go back to the Cyberpunk 2077 extended gameplay demo that they showed off a while ago, I'll definitely say that before they unlocked all the character abilities, the combat didn't really look that great. That said, once they unlocked the character abilities and you were like, you know, running with your arm blades, slow motion, sliding, doing all that stuff with your smart gun and all, that seemed really fun. So I'll say this much. I think that the core of the combats, like the core shooting and stuff like that, with a base character who's not spec'd into that, probably not that great, right? It's probably just okay. But I am assuming their design is that once you specialize your character more and more and more, you'll feel a lot more powerful. But I would also say, how much is that even that important? Now, I'm not saying this as an excuse for anything that's bad in the game, but what I will say is, look at Deus Ex. Deus Ex does not have the best combat in the universe, right? I think we can all agree. But it's a really, really good immersive sim, because it's doing a lot of other things that are far more important to the point of that game very, very, very well. So as long as the inherent playability is there and the mechanics all just work well enough to get the job done, well then that is just the vehicle for the real meat of that game. And I think that's what's the most important with Cyberpunk, and I think that's what most of the players, or the potential players of that game, are interested in when they're looking at its demos and its promotional material and all of that stuff. So overall, I would say, does it look like an amazing shooter? No. Does it look like it could be a decent enough, competent one? Yeah, there maybe could be a good bit more fun once you start working out, you know, a more advanced build for your character. But of course, it's a lot more than that. There seemingly is a lot of depth in how you approach things. You seemingly can talk your way through problems, stealth your way through problems. It's came out that you can complete the game without, without killing anyone, which I think is great. That's what I love doing in Deus Ex. So it's pretty clear that combat's not the only thing involved here, and that judging this game as a first-person shooter maybe is not the best thing to do. Again, I'm not making excuses, but yeah, like if Doom Eternal or Wolfenstein Youngblood had the pistol gameplay from the early section of that demo that they released a while ago, yeah, wouldn't be good because those games are action FPSs, but that's not what Cyberpunk is. Cyberpunk's going to hopefully provide people with a deep, rich, immersive world where your choices have consequences. That is where that game will live or die, not necessarily the shooting mechanics, as long as they are competent enough to get the job done. So, there you go, that is my opinion on the recent dramas with Cyberpunk 2077. I don't want to outward say that people are being bad actors or acting in bad faith. I'll say that perhaps people who are not that interested in the game, or perhaps are not that interested in the genre of the game, have maybe ended up taking a rather surface level appraisal of it that has been convenient to the argument that they wanted to make, rather than having a more deep and self-critical exploration of the topic before they hit the publish button, which is, I think, what people ideally should be doing before they publish an opinion piece. You kind of need to work out, what are my own biases going into this, and something along those lines anyway. But more importantly, I want to know what you think about all of this stuff, so please let me know in those comments down below. And with that, thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.